So far, we have been looking at the American side of this whole entire thing before the Europeans came over. What was it like in the Americas? And we talked a little bit about the first groups of people who migrated there, the development of the different civilizations and Native Americans throughout both South and North America. But now we're going to shift our gaze over to Africa, right? And see what Africa was like before the Europeans became involved as well. Because we're looking at each of these three places, Europe, Africa, and America, because they both intersect, right, during colonial times. Africa, because this is where the slave trade then begins, and they're all transported over to the Americas to work there. The Native Americans, because they are then pushed off their land and interact with conflict with the Europeans. And of course, the Europeans, because they set sail to come and colonize these areas and create all of these new colonies and bring in new trade and money back to Europe. So we're taking a look at these three continents before they actually meet. So now we're going to shift our gaze over to Africa and talk about the three early African kingdoms in West Africa in particular, because this is the region that really comes into contact with the Europeans, is where all of the slave ports eventually will come from. Before the three kingdoms, there were a group of North African traders that were known as Berbers. And these were the ones who were usually in charge of the trade routes all throughout Western North Africa. And they brought in a lot of different goods back and forth. Eventually, this area here of North Africa along the Niger River, which is where these kingdoms all flourished, is going to be taken over by these three kingdoms. The first of which is Ghana, is the earliest of these three kingdoms right here in red, that develops in the Niger River and that takes over these trade routes, and by taking over these trade routes becomes a very powerful force in West Africa. So the Empire of Ghana, or the Kingdom of Ghana, starts to flourish around 300 AD. It controlled the region and therefore controlling the trade routes, primarily salt that they gained from the Sahara Desert, and then gold that was found within Ghana itself. And these were two major goods that were traded along the trade routes controlled by Ghana, making it very, very powerful, that it then used to be able to supply an army and becoming a very powerful empire or very powerful kingdom. Ghana is going to continue to flourish to about the 1060s AD, of which then a new group, a Muslim group known as the Almoravids, are going to come into the region and try to force Ghana and their leaders to convert to Islam. And in doing so, they begin to cut off the trade routes that Ghana used. And with no access to their trade routes, eventually the Empire of Ghana is going to decline, and it's going to lose its power and hold over the trade region of West Africa, leaving the region open for a new kingdom to come into power, and that's going to be the Kingdom of Mali. And we'll talk more about that in our next screencast.